Hello and welcome to Town Meeting TV's coverage of Town Meeting Day 2026. My name is Debbie Ingram. This program is part of a series of budget presentations and candidate forums hosted by Town Meeting TV in advance of Town Meeting Day, which is Tuesday, March 3rd of this year. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. You can find all of our forums at cctv.org/TMD2026. Or you can watch on Town Meeting TV's YouTube channel, where auto-generated captions are available. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button so that you can stay tuned in to all local democracy this election season. Now, on tonight's program, we will hear from the Champlain Valley School District leaders about their proposed budget, which voters will consider on Town Meeting Day. CVSD encompasses the towns of Charlotte, Heinsberg, Shelburne, St. George, and Williston. Our guests are Superintendent Adam Bunting, Chief Operating Officer Gary Marcres, and School Board Chair Megan Metzler. Thank you all for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
So if you're tuning in live at home, we also welcome your questions, and you can do that by calling 802-862-3966. If you call in, we will do our best to prioritize your question, though we will screen calls to ensure questions are not repeated. We ask that when you call in, you share your name and the town that you live in. Well, let's get started now with the presentation, and I believe Superintendent Bunting is going to kick us off.
Yeah, please call me Adam, by the way.
All right.
So first of all, we just want to thank you for hosting us tonight. We're excited to be here to talk about our budget. We've worked really hard on it the last many months, I would say. And, you know, we're also glad to be here to talk a little bit about what I would describe as the negative narrative that's out there in our state around education. And it may not just be our state, I think, nationally as well. Recently, I penned an op-ed after seeing in our local papers several letters from some senators and representatives talking about, I think echoing some of the governor's statements around that Vermont has a failing education system. And often that failure is described using NAEP data, which looks at literacy and math. And unfortunately, that NAEP data can't be disaggregated by district. And so when I saw those letters appearing in our local papers, you know, anyone who's putting a budget together, that's worrisome, because it makes people question, like, are we really getting, you know, what we're paying for? You know, where are our taxes going? Are kids being successful? And for us, you know, we felt this imperative to share what we would say is the real story with CVSD and in our towns. You know, we've on the slide deck we have here, we have some statistics. So things like a 96% four-year graduation rate, that's phenomenal. You know, we aren't hearing people celebrate those things. Looking at the fact that 87% of CVS students scored proficient or above on standardized literacy assessments, that's including things like the SAT and the VT CAP. And I get these aren't numbers that folks who really want to reform education, that they're not going to celebrate that right now. But we also felt like we need to show our communities what our truth is and what we see. And I think even more importantly than the academic data for us is how engaged are our students? Because we know engagement is a predictor of lifelong well-being. And it's something that we believe points to whether we're achieving our mission, and that's growth and belonging for all students. So we're a little non-traditional in what we measure. We actually do a lot of perception data. We mix that perception data in with other standardized and other performance measures, and come together to pull out some of the indicators of success that we're most proud of. So things like 96% of our students surveyed say they have friends at school who treat them with kindness and respect. If you're a young person, that's huge, right? That is a key to overall well-being. 86% of our third graders saying that they feel like they can be their authentic selves at school. We know that's a precursor for learning. That's not something that people talk a lot about when you look at educational data. 93% of grades 3 through 8 students surveyed say their learning is helping them now and for their future. That relevance in learning is really important. So we're not going to go over all of these statistics, and certainly we're not saying we're perfect by any means, but we feel like we need to get out there and share our story about where our tax dollars are going and why our community should support us. Like that to us is really important. And as we engaged in the budget process that we have this year, you know, we really wanted to think about, especially after the last 2 years, and Megan and Gary will talk a little bit more about this, but we've gone through $9 million of reductions in service. We've cut 82 positions, and we found ourselves in a place this year where we're like, okay, we absolutely need to respect our taxpayers. We need to respect what we're hearing from our community. We always want to be responsible with our money, but we have to be student-focused in this because we believe in our product. We believe in what students are experiencing. We want to be proactive. We want to be transparent, and we want to just be as collaborative as we can. But that whole process has to be centered in our mission, in our vision, and in the outcomes that we're looking at for students. So sort of a long-winded introduction, but we're passionate about it. So.
Well, thank you. That's helpful to set the broader context of how we look at it. And we look at a budget, any kind of budget, but in particularly this school district's budget. So,
great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I think I'm going to hand it over to Gary right now. He's going to talk about some of our...
So first, I think Megan will talk about it a little more, but before we kind of get into the meat of it, like the board and administration's relationship at CVSD is something that, like, I haven't experienced in all the years I've been working in education. And I think that board development and the understanding of really the technical side of the funding system in Vermont has really allowed our board to work together with us to really understand where it's possible, what we can control and what we don't, and where it's possible to make efficiency type reductions to keep the core of what we're trying to get done. And that's what we tried to do this year. So every year we have things that are difficult, headwinds, and things that are kind of unique, and not just to CVSD, but to education in general. And I'll just cover a couple of them now. So after Act 127 happened, there was subsequent legislation after that was passed that established a declining tax rate discount. So there is it started at a 17-cent discount for us, and it reduces by 20% each year for 5 years. So that declines and puts us in a situation where we know we have to raise less money for the same tax rate each year. The persistent healthcare increases have been difficult. That's been a headwind over the last several years. Over the last 5 years, I think our district costs in healthcare premiums have risen about 48%, and that's pretty tough in the budget environment. The uncertainty in federal funding is something we considered this year. And then to the parts that we can't control, like the variability in the assessment cycles in towns and the big need for reassessment across the state, slowing that process down, it kind of magnifies the final tax rate that our taxpayers pay each year when an assessment doesn't happen. And then the tailwinds, we have always and continue to enjoy a really committed and highly talented workforce. Our teachers are tremendous. Our support staff are really dedicated. That relationship I talked about with the board and the administration has paid giant dividends over the last few years. We are below the statewide average in expenditure increases for FY26. And then we're below the statewide in FY27, and in FY26 we actually ended up with a final tax rate that was on average across our 5 towns, 4% lower than FY25. So it was a strong position to come into this budget with. And then first and foremost, I'm sure this came from Adam, that we have awesome kids. So that is, those are kind of the headwinds and tailwinds.
You know that too.
I do. I see them daily. Touching a little bit on class size and kind of the importance of the work that we have been committed to doing each year for the last several years, really post-COVID. Scale is important. Efficiency is important. We don't want to have too many kids in the classroom, but we want to try to find that optimal number, and we're getting really close. Our anticipated class sizes at the K through 8 level for FY27, average 20 students per class, which is above the targets, and Act 73 considerably above them. And in the high school, they also average over 20 students per teacher in our classroom. So we feel like we're making pretty good strides to get to kind of an optimal, maximize efficiency and reduce spending by having appropriate class sizes.
Yeah, and I think, I think Adam and Gary both have really laid out what we as the board had to think about, So I've been on the board for 5 years. I've kind of seen the process that we've gone through overall. And when you're a board member, you hear from your community, which is your job, right? So we've heard a lot from taxpayers who feel like, man, taxes have been increasing so much. And we are all taxpayers. Adam and I are taxpayers in the district. Gary's a Vermont taxpayer as well. I know what my tax bill is this year versus when I moved in 13 years ago. But I also know, I'm also a parent in the district. I have 2 kids in CVSD schools, and I can see the impact of those changes that Adam has talked about and what that means for kids. And not only do I see it myself and what the opportunities for kids, but I get a lot of email, and we hear a lot from parents and staff and educators and students about what that has looked like. So as we were coming together for the FY27 budget, I think, actually one of the local headlines in one of our local papers is that the board was grappling with our budget. And I was like, that is the perfect word for what we're doing, because everything that, we want to be able to continue to provide the same services this year and next. So what the board said to Adam and Gary was, come to us. I called it a level-ish service budget because we asked them to show us what a level service budget would look like. And what level service means is really no cuts to programming. The same number of people we wouldn't have those big layoffs that we've had for the past few years, past reductions. And we said, show us what that would look like. And they came back to us, and the numbers that they showed us were a little bit higher than I think we were comfortable with. So we said, okay, show us, and that's where the level-ish service came in. Show us level-ish service. Show us what you can do that will continue to provide services, but really go and sharpen your pencil again and see what else you can do. And I think to their great credit, that's what this budget represents. It represents a very fiscally responsible budget, a 5% increase year over year. That reflects contractual increases in salaries of 5.5%. Or 5.5% for our faculty. That also reflects a 7% increase, or more than 7% increase in our health care, and other expenses that we have as a district. And even with that, both those amounts are greater than 5%. And when people are the big portion of your budget, coming in at 5% was really an area that the board felt very comfortable with, and we unanimously approved this budget last week. And I think that, when you also take a look at it overall on a per pupil basis, a per weighted pupil basis, the total increase per student is only 2.7%. As Gary said before, that's significantly lower than all the state projections that we've seen. And for the past 3 years, our increase in per pupil spending has been about half of what the rest of the state has been overall. So we did grapple with it. I think we're really comfortable with where we landed. And we're really appreciative, speaking to collaboration, we're really appreciative to the administration for how thoughtful they were in coming up with this budget.
Great. Well, thank you all for your summaries. And I do have a few questions that I would follow up with you on. Gary, you were talking about being uncertain about the federal monies that might come in. What typically do federal dollars pay for in the school budget?
So we get grant funding for some special education services for Title I, which is to provide services for economically disadvantaged. We get Medicaid funding, and we know Medicaid funding has some changes for the coming year. We don't know what they are yet, unfortunately, but we know there is some change to how Medicaid will be administered.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Well, I think everybody knows that the federal government is in a bit of a state now, right? So, and then also a lot of the conversations about things that schools have to provide center around maybe programs and offerings that are outside of what people think of as traditional classroom education. So I'm not sure who would like to speak to that, but maybe
I could touch on that just briefly. I'm thinking a little bit about some of the numbers that we've been looking at this year, where we had, I think in our district last year, 740 students or families and caregivers who are economically disadvantaged. This year that number is 906, or 904, I'm sorry, if I remember correctly. And with that, I think comes a responsibility if we talk about engagement, and we are really focused on making sure all of our students are not only engaged in what you think of as like an individual class, but are they like in a state where they're receptive to learning because their basic needs are being met. So we have a homeless liaison who works with our district who is working with families to make sure that they have housing, to make sure that we have that they have their basic needs being met, so that when students come to school that they are receptive to learning. We're working on things like chronic absenteeism, as is everybody in the state right now. You think about some of the supports that we need that we're achieving through our social workers, and making sure that we don't think of mental health as isolated into one individual, right? We know we're all a part of our system. We know that our kids are part of larger family systems, and if you really want to make progress with family systems, you have to have people who can work with the whole family. And a lot of times school counselors aren't necessarily set up to do that. So you see schools across our state, when we're lamenting the fact that we don't have mental health supports, schools are doing the best they can to provide those, because if we really believe in learning, we have to do that. It's essential. So.
Yeah. I think I would just say, as someone who's, as much time as I spend on board work, I'm not in the buildings every day, but and I don't consider myself and I'm not an educator. But when you do board work and you spend the time in the schools and you see the systems as they work, I think it's really eye-opening to see just how much. I think if you've not been in schools in a long time, or if your thoughts about what education is based on when you were a kid or what your experience was, it is very different what's expected of school systems. And speaking about mental health and social emotional behavior health, those are real needs in our schools in order for our kids to be able to learn and feel like they're in a place to learn and to do well. And it's just a lot more than you would think if you haven't kind of been in a school in the past however many years. I don't know if you would add anything else.
I would follow up with food. Like, we have chosen as a district to invest in a really high quality food service program. Federal and state reimbursement aren't enough to cover that totally, and I have appreciated, since I've been here, the board's commitment to adding and investing in that high quality food, because it's really critical to the engagement and the academic performance in classrooms.
great, yeah. And then I wonder if maybe you could put the district itself in context compared to the rest of the state a little bit. Am I right in saying it's one of the largest districts in the
The
state?
largest.
It is the largest. Okay. And do you know how the investment that you make in the budget compares to some of the other districts?
Probably turn to Megan on this one, who's done a lot of thinking about it.
Well, I mean, I think if we asked, the board has asked, and others, and the board has asked the administration several times, tell us how we're doing. Like, we want to be able to say, tell us how. I want to be able to say as a board member, tell us how our kids are doing. And I think Adam kind of relayed those facts in the beginning about 96% of our students graduate high school in under 4 years. 87% of our third graders were proficient in reading, and those numbers are above and beyond the state averages and really national averages as well. We've asked the administration to come up with some data just so we can kind of share that, and that's on our website as well, just where we are. But we're really proud of the investment that we're making. We think it's a really good investment in our kids.
And to add, we are above the statewide average in cost, but I think that is true throughout Chittenden County. Our educators have to live here. The cost of living is significantly higher than other areas in the state. So I think that's kind of a natural place to be. We have done a lot of work to keep that cost per student down, but it is kind of a fact that the higher cost of living areas where people have to live require a little more in wages and salary.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's been a lot of talk about our formula for determining what people's property taxes are, but I always think it's worth saying that there's not a one-to-one correlation between your particular district that you're in and what you're going to pay, right? And maybe you could say a little bit more about that, because there's the state education property tax, which of course there's a lot of debate now in the legislature and with the governor as to how to adjust that, but maybe is there a simple way to talk about that?
I think decisions of every school board in the state impact every school district's tax rate in the state. It's about as simple as I can put it. Yeah. We do actually pay in more in our district than we receive back in an education spending grant.
Yeah, and it's for those reasons that and it is really complex, and once even once you think you understand it, you're like, oh, there's something else I didn't think about or that I didn't quite understand. But it is really complex. But I mean, it's all those nuances, and if someone wants to sit down and talk to us about it, we're happy to take you through it. I'll ask Gary to do it, but I could do it too. And I think that it's all those intricacies of this system as to why our 5% increase in taxes, our 5% increase in expenditures at 2.7% per pupil is going to lead to, for this year, a higher increase on tax from a property tax perspective for our community, as far as we could tell.
Right, and but that has to do a lot with what else is happening in the rest of the state.
Yep, there's not a one-for-one, unfortunately.
Yes,
yep.
right. Yeah.
Can I air a little pet peeve while we're talking?
Oh, sure, yes, of course. Now's your chance.
God, what are you going to say? No, when we start talking about our funding formulas and we're talking about redistricting and transformation across our state, I always find it a little sad that we're not talking about the future. And there's been such little dialogue about how our schools should be positioning themselves to meet kind of the future needs of our students. We are stuck talking about a paradigm of education, that's been pretty stable over the last couple of 100 years, I just hope as we're having these discussions about funding, that we can also start really thinking about our state. I think could be poised to have the most progressive, exciting educational landscape in the country, and we're not talking that way. So, I hope as these dialogues unfold in the next few years that we're talking about the outcomes that our kids are getting, as opposed to just redrawing lines. So.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the process then of voting. So the vote will be on Tuesday, March 3rd, and we want to encourage everybody to get out and vote or vote early. And what happens, well, best case scenario is passes, right, and then you move forward with what you already have planned. But it could be, though, and has happened in the past, that that the voters vote it down. So what then is the process if that happens?
Yep. So if that happens, and it did happen in 2024, I think the board will come back. We will work with the administration to come up with a budget that we think the community will support. We'll look to see what the results were, and we will, reevaluate where we want to go, make some really difficult decisions, and we'll revote on it in April.
In April.
But to be clear, our hope is that we exceed the 70% support rate that we got from last year's vote.
Absolutely. Yes. To be clear, that is our goal.
Right.
I think it does. I mean, I think to Megan's point, it starts with listening, and then really thinking about, so were these factors under our control or not? And I think we look a couple of years ago when you had H-850 come rolling through from the legislature as we were wrapping up our budgets. It was, a lot of, I think, the angst that we felt from our taxpayers was like, oh, we're sending a message to Montpelier. Okay, well, you're sending a message through our kids.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's not send it that way. But we would listen and be humble and work hard.
Yep.
Right. Great, and we don't, the way the vote is done in the district, even though it encompasses 5 different towns, we don't know which town votes which. I always think that's interesting, because I'm often one of the counters of the ballots. But so it's unified. It really is unified.
Our ballots are commingled. We can't begin, as you know, counting ballots until at least 2 of them have been commingled, and then we'll often be asked, well, what did one town versus the other? And the answer is, I don't know. And I'm actually grateful for that. I think we're one district, we're one board, we're one community, and that's how the community is discussing things.
And I think it's illustrative as we're having these conversations about how to restructure. This is a unified school district, and underwent some big changes recently, or not, before a lot of other districts have, and but has really come together. Hasn't it?
Yeah.
A lot,
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you can tell, maybe folks can tell I live in the district. I live in Williston.
We hope we convince one voter tonight.
One voter, that's right.
That's our goal.
That's right. So I'm going to ask if, I'm not sure who would like to do it, but if you could just succinctly summarize. So what's your big takeaway about the budget, your proposal for this year?
This is a $107.9 million budget. It's a 5% increase over last year. It's only 2.7% per pupil higher than last year. It's a budget that the board really grappled with, but we absolutely 100% believe in, and we think that it provides the opportunities for kids that they need.
All right, thank you. There's the soundbite. Okay, folks. So thank you so much, all 3 of you. I think we had a very interesting discussion and a lot of good information. So thanks for being here, and thank you at home for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of local candidates, budgets, and ballot items. You can find this and many more forums at cctv.org/TMD2026. or on Town Meeting TV's YouTube channel. And don't forget to cast your ballot on Town Meeting Day, or even before Town Meeting Day. You can do early voting, and that is March 3rd. And then you can tune back into us here at Town Meeting TV to see the results recap show that evening. We start that live at 7 p.m. So contact your local clerk to find out how to obtain a ballot if you want to vote early. And also, if you haven't registered yet, find out how to do that. It's very easy in Vermont, and in fact, you can register the same day. And we want to thank everybody at home for watching and sharing Town Meeting TV.